Good afternoon. My name is Doug Holder, and I'm here with my guest on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer, Charles Coe. You want to move up a little? I want to see your handsome face there.
How's this?
Yeah, that looks good. And I'll read a brief introduction to Charles Coe. He has a new book out, and I was reading a marvelous book, one of many, a few books that he's had out. All Sins Forgiven, Poems for My Parents, and it's available, of course, at the usual places, Amazon.com, and he's been giving readings, and folks like Marge Piercy have, lauded the book, and well-deserved. Take my hat off here. I was first going to read an introduction to Charles. Charles is the author of a poetry collection, Picnic on the Moon. His poetry and prose have appeared in numerous newspapers and literary reviews and magazines. And his poems have been set to music by composers Julia Carey, Beth Dennis, and Robert Morin. He also writes featured articles, book reviews, and interviews for publications at Harvard Magazine, Northeastern University Law Review, Boston Phoenix, which is no longer with us.
The late lamented.
In addition to the work as a writer, Charles has an extensive background as a jazz vocalist and has performed and recorded with numerous musicians in the Boston area. And, I've interviewed you a number of times, I think on this show once, and for the Somerville News, and also for a long-forgotten magazine in the South End. So it's good to revisit you because you always have something new happening. You also work for the Mass Cultural Council.
Right,
as well,
that's my full-time gig.
That's your full-time. Every writer needs a gig.
Oh,
right?
yes.
Every writer needs a gig. So, Ethelbert Miller, I believe it is.
Ethelbert Miller?
Ethelbert Miller says your new collection of poetry, All Sins Forgiven, captures the tenderness and intimacy within the black family, which is unnoticed. Tell me, what is noticed and why, and what is noticed about the black family, and why is this unnoticed?
Well, I think a lot of groups, cultural groups, ethnic groups, are portrayed in the media in pretty stereotypical ways. And a lot of times when you see a black family written about or portrayed on a television show or in a movie, there are certain tropes. Violence, gangs and so forth, domestic discord, sports, or music. And there's really not a lot about just ordinary life. And I think that's part of what Ethelbert was talking about, that a lot of the poems in this book really just look at
all sins forgiven.
All Sins Forgiven.
Yeah.
Look at just ordinary family life.
Okay. You've been publishing with the Leapfrog Press for a while now, and it's changed hands and all that. So can you give me a brief history of of Leapfrog and your experience with the Leapfrog Press?
Well, Leapfrog was started, I believe, in the early 90s by the novelist poet Marge Piercy and her husband, novelist Ira Wood. And in 1999, they actually approached me to see if I was interested in submitting a manuscript for possible publication.
Okay.
And I was very excited to be asked, and I did that, and we worked out a deal. And so Picnic on the Moon, my first book, came out in 1999.
Okay.
And so I've been doing a lot of other things, writing poetry and doing other kinds of writing, having my full-time job. And it took a while for this next book to be ready for the road. But then in April 2013, Leapfrog brought out the second book, All Sins Forgiven.
Okay. Now, you have an extensive background as a jazz vocalist. Can you talk a bit about this and what vocalists have been, big influence on you?
Wow, that's a long list of vocalists. I guess for me the platinum standard is Ella Fitzgerald. She is my all-time favorite vocalist when you're looking at jazz, which is mostly what I do.
Do you do a lot of scat sort of singing?
I do some
scat. Somerville Community Access TV.
Yeah, that's right. Bada boom, bada bing.
Yeah.
I do some scatting, but I don't focus on it as much as some jazz singers do. And that's not a position or a moral code. It's just I like to sing the song,
Mhm.
and occasionally when there's a sort of texture or color I want to put in, I will scat. But I don't do a scat solo on every song I sing,
Okay.
for example.
Maybe can you give us a little
A little
something?
scat sample.
Well, not a little scat, but no, but a little.
Uh, okay. When the red, red robin comes bob, bob, bobbing along, along, there'll be no more sobbing when he starts throbbing his old sweet song. Wake up, you sleepy as get up, get out of the sky is turning red. And so that's the kind
Yeah.
of tune you would do some scatting on.
Sort of American songbook type
Yeah,
stuff.
American songbook stuff. So if you want to do a scat solo on that, you know, so you just go off onto it. But when it fits, you know, I think of scatting as pepper in a stew. You
Do
want
you think
some.
scatting is like a precursor to what, hip hop now, kind of?
Yeah, I see a lot of, I wouldn't say precursors so much as there was scat and then there was hip hop, but I think scat's one of the musical influence that hip hop artists look for inspiration to. I mean, hip hop artists look to Miles Davis for inspiration. They look to blues. They look to instrumental jazz. I think hip hop is a very misunderstood medium. You know, there's a lot of crap out there. If you turn on a commercial radio, you hear some stuff that's pretty depressing. But if you listen to the college stations or you ask some young people, what are you listening to that's not on the radio, what do you really like? I think some of the most amazing, most challenging, creative writing that's happening right now is hip-hop lyrics.
Okay. Now, most of us have a different view of our parents. I know now I'm flirting with 60. I have a very different view of my parents than I did when I was when I was in my 20s. And as we go through different stages of life, we have different views of our parents based on our own experience and understanding. So, how has your so you're flirting, if you're not 60, you're flirting with the
I'm
same.
60, I'm flirting with 61.
You're flirting with 61, so you've already consummated the whole thing.
I have consummated 60.
I'm still fucking around. Oh, I shouldn't have, sorry. But anyway, how has it changed? I mean, this book is probably, the final comment on it. Or it might change even more, but usually by this time. How has it changed? How has it changed? How has your parents changed?
I understand. So when you're young, I think it's very difficult to realize that your parents are actually people. They're actually people. And flawed and complex. I think when you're young, it's almost like you thought of your high school teachers. At night, somebody puts them in a closet and unplugs the battery and shuts the door, and they get awakened in time to go to class or in time to get you ready for school. But the older you get, the more you realize that there are a million questions you never asked them. There are a million things you don't know about them. What they were afraid of, what they were sad about, what they were proud of. And I can't have those conversations with them now because they're gone. And this book was, in a way of asking some of those questions. And I'll never hear what they...
It sort of reminds me of that movie, I Never Sang for My Father.
Oh, it's a beautiful movie.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful movie.
Yeah. And it's, did you ever have closure with your parents, you think? Or, I know I regret that I didn't with my father.
I said some things. I didn't say all the things I wish I had said now. But I did say some things.
Yeah.
At least I wasn't angry with him. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I do have some anger about some things that happened when I was growing up. But anger was not the core component of my relationship with them. So when they died, I wasn't thinking, oh man, we never reconciled. We were we never made peace with each other. There was all this anger and conflict that never got addressed. Thankfully, I don't have that, but a lot of people do. A lot of people do.
Now, when I wrote my thesis years ago, master's thesis, I wrote it on food and fiction of Henry Roth, and I noticed in your book, I've noticed food. And I always thought, they told me at the time that food was trivial, but I proved them wrong. Food isn't trivial as a way of, examining the texture of one's life. And in your new collection, there's a recurrent theme of food: pot roast your father prepared, how your father learned to cook, your father preparing Thanksgiving dinner, and I know you write about food too, also. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, I feel food is evocative. What is your affinity as food in terms of using it in your poetry?
First of all, I really like to eat food. That's a habit.
Not everyone does, right?
That's true. Some people just like food.
Yeah.
But I love food, perhaps a bit too well, but that's a discussion for another day. And I think that food is an incredible way for people to share time together. It's
bonding.
It's bonding, it's comfort, it's communication, it's community. Mm-hmm. And those knuckleheads who told you that food was trivial, they just don't know what they're talking about. There's this sort of literary snobbery.
Well, now I think it's more considered a legitimate way of examining literature.
Well, it's always been legitimate. It's just that those people, whoever told you that, was too foolish and too hidebound to realize it. Yeah. There is no subject under the sun that is trivial. The only thing that's trivial is the mind that approaches the subject. Mm-hmm. The writer. And
that goes for poetry. Poetry.
It goes. Yeah. One of the things about poetry is, in my view, great poetry can make the banal profound, and bad poetry can make the profound banal. It's not about the subject matter, it's about the writer. It's how much craft and emotional genuineness, authenticity that writers bring into the task. That's it.
Okay.
No subject is beneath the serious writer. That's just poppycock, as they would say.
Okay. Thank you.
I give them the back of my hand.
All right. Thank you. Now, this book that deals with your family extensively, and has it given you any sense of closure?
Yes and no. Mm-hmm. I'm very glad I wrote it. But as I said, I wrote it as a way of understanding some things about my parents, and I have learned a lot about them and about myself with this book. And not just writing the book, but the process of being out there and reading it and really plunging into it in a different way after it now exists as an object that I take around to readings and I explore with people, and the questions people ask and the experiences they share. I mean, I've learned a tremendous amount about my parents, but the idea that I've come to some ultimate understanding of them.
It's ultimately, we're all mysterious to each other, right?
And the people you're closest to sometimes are the most mysterious.
Yeah, right. And sometimes we're a mystery to ourselves, more than often.
How about every day?
Every day. So, what I was going to ask you also about you were telling me about your work in the Mass Cultural Council, which you've done for many years. And you were talking about traveling around, going to see the western part of the state, Great Barrington, and theaters that have been renovated and all that. Tell me a bit about your work.
Okay. Well, I work for the State Arts Council, the Massachusetts Cultural Council. I'm in year 17, and I oversee a grant program that gives money to cultural organizations that's not restricted money, that's not for a particular program or project, that they can spend to keep the lights on, or buy a computer when their old one blows up, or hire a part-time development writer. It's the hardest kind of money, if you're with a nonprofit organization, it's the hardest kind of money to get, because a lot of funders want to give money that's targeted to a particular initiative. And so part of my job, in addition to doing a lot of paperwork, involved going around the state to visit the organizations we fund, not to examine them or inspect them, but just to find out about them. You know, find out what they're doing, answer their questions about the State Arts Council, and just do some porch sitting, as we would call it back in Indiana. And I love that. I love that part of it.
The porch sitting.
The porch sitting, yeah.
Yeah. And tell me, do you have any readings for All Sins Forgiven? I was going to ask you the title. Whose sins are forgiven? Both. I mean, what were you saying?
That's a good question. Well, ostensibly and obviously it was forgiving my parents, but I also realized pretty early in the process of writing it, and certainly since I've been reading it from it, is forgiving myself for not having asked those questions, not having helped them more when they were older and starting to have problems, not having spent more time with them, not having pushed through some of the reservations that our parents often have about, you know, discussing their lives themselves. So forgiving them and forgiving me as well.
Okay. Well, you have about 12 minutes to read from your selected works.
Okay.
There, and so let it rip.
Okay, let's read a few poems.
Okay.
This is one, let's see, that anyone who went to Catholic school back in the days might relate to. A meeting of minds. One day when my first grade class was learning to write, Sister Edna took the pencil from my left hand, put it in my right, and told me to keep it there. When I told Mother that evening, she said nothing, but the next day got on the school bus. After morning mass, as children filed into class, she pulled Sister Edna aside and asked, "Sister, did you tell my son he can't write with his left hand?" Sister Edna replied she had indeed. Went on to explain that left-handed children have problems developing verbal skills and smear ink on the page when their hands drag over what they've written. Mother heard her out, then said quietly, "Sister, my son is left-handed." The two women stared at each other a long moment like convicts on the yard until finally Sister Edna nodded. To this day, I remain left-handed. A lot of
Sure, I'm sorry about this.
a lot of younger folks don't know what it was like for a young black woman to basically put a beat down on a nun. So that was pretty much a big deal back in the day. This is one from my father, Fort Bliss, El Paso, Texas, August 1951. The milk-white sun gazes down like the eye of some implacable lizard. In the photograph, you squint in brand new uniform, shirt too large as if yanked off a shelf, tossed your way after some bored corporal's cursory glance. The cap clings to your buzz cut at the proper angle, but Father, you look like exactly what you are, a boy playing soldier. Some barracks buddy, forever anonymous, snaps the shutter. You trade places, later send pictures home to mothers who will lie awake because they know that fire and steel love the taste of young flesh.
You know, your mother seemed a very strong woman from when I was reading. You know, she would just, I particularly was impressed. Maybe you can read this one about how she sort of stared her nun down.
That was the one.
Oh, that was
the meeting of the minds.
Oh, the meeting of the minds.
Where
Okay.
about
I was spacing out. I'm sorry. But
No problem.
Yeah.
But the nun had told me that I couldn't write with my left,
Yeah.
and she went to school with me and told the nun that my son is left-handed, and they were kind of,
Yeah.
and the nun, you know, blinked, and that was it. I'm a lefty.
Yeah. But you know, they used to try to train people to be righty. I know
Yeah.
my father, they used
Yeah.
to try to,
Exactly.
and they screwed him up, actually.
Oh yeah, and I've had people come up to me after readings and tell me stories about their own family,
Right.
siblings, or sometimes them
Yeah.
themselves, who either nun or some other teacher or parent, and so you have to write with your right hand.
Now I'm preparing pot roast tonight. I have it, simmering for the wife. So maybe you can read the pot roast.
Sure. Let me find that. That's 5 haiku for my father's pot roast. When choosing the meat, father carefully inspects each scarlet treasure. On the cutting board, potatoes, carrots, onions, beautiful friendship. Speckled porcelain bubbling beneath the lid, sweet, fragrant music. Now the meat is served, while our eager forks await an introduction. Father's folded hands, the only sound in the room, quiet words of thanks.
Nice.
Thank you.
Nice.
There's one, my parents had a rough time toward the end. So I wrote,
How long have they been?
well, my mother, it's been 7 years, and my father, it's my father, it's been 8 years. My mother, it's been 7. So she went pretty soon after he did.
It happens often.
Yeah, and my sister actually died a few years ago of liver cancer. So
How old is she? Younger? Or older?
she was 4 years, almost 4 years older.
Oh,
So that was terrible.
that is terrible.
Terrible. She has a son who has a family of his own, and we keep in touch. But it was very hard for him, very, very hard.
Wow, that is young to go.
That is young to go, yeah. She was a little shy of her 60th birthday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't know how it happened, how it was caused, or anything like that.
Well, liver cancer has many
Yeah.
possible causes, so
Yeah.
sometimes they have this word in the medical profession that someone has an idiopathic condition. And what, from your medical
Yeah.
exposure, that means we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But they can't say we don't know what it is.
Oh, we now eat enough things from Monsanto and all that.
Yeah,
That's
right.
right.
Yeah, we'll all have 3 heads.
Yeah.
But this one, a poem for happy endings. The hero gets the girl. The villain plunges to his doom. His bitter face disappears in fire and smoke. The estranged lovers embrace while violins cue the audience to reach for tissues. The script I wrote for my parents included father's retirement scene, the crowded banquet hall, speaker after speaker telling stories filled with that rough humor men use to disguise their love. And then the day's fishing, tinkering with the lawnmower, sitting on the porch with a Western novel, keeping a watchful eye on traffic. Now the camera turns to mother. In a long shot, we see the little gray house with garden in back, a small figure kneeling in the dirt, a big floppy hat blocking the sun. She's digging a hole for the next petunia. Zoom in on her wrist, fine boned as a bird's. Who hands out the happy endings? Who, late one night, stood outside my parents' home, gazed a moment at some mark scrawled on the door, then just turned to walk away, the sound of footsteps fading on the empty street.
You're talking about the men disguising their love, and you're talking about the men of the quote-unquote greatest generation, right? Do you think it's changed at all? Do we still, are we more emotive now, or what do you think?
I think so, and you got to remember that, our whole generation was raised by a generation of men with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right. My
Basically.
father said he couldn't leave the house for 2 months when he got home. He had to go to, after he was in Battle of the Bulge and all that stuff, yeah. How about yours? Was he in combat?
No, he was drafted during the Korean War,
Oh, okay.
but he wound up stateside.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And the Korean War was a horrible, horrible,
Horrible.
horrible war.
Yeah.
All wars are
All
horrible
are, yeah,
wars.
but that was particularly.
But I saw this really amazing clip with Patrick Stewart
Yeah.
from Star Wars,
Yeah.
and he does a lot of work with organizations that help battered women because his mother was battered by his father. But he found out only a few years ago that his father had shell shock when he was fighting in France. And back then, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder, oh, shell shock. Yeah, he got dinged. And these men were told to get over it and just go back to their lives, you know, suck it up and go back to the office at the factory and go raise your families.
Right.
And they never got any relief from the condition because they never got any acknowledgement.
He was a
or
World War II
treatment.
veteran?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think, yes, that this generation of men, not across the board, but there's a lot of light among the guys now in that realm. You never even heard men talking about it. You never heard society acknowledge anything like spouse abuse when we were kids. You'd see a woman would stay home because she had been all beaten up by her husband, and if she did show up somewhere, oh, I fell down some stairs or whatever. Or, oh, I must have made him angry, because it was always the woman's fault.
Right.
Well, you must have done something to upset him.
The long suffering.
Exactly.
Like a Douglas Kirk movie, Skirk. What was it, Kirk or Douglas?
Douglas, not in the Star Trek
Far
movie? Oh,
from Heaven. No.
Yeah. Far from Heaven with
the repressed housewife.
Dennis Haysbert and Julianne Moore. And
There was an older version too of this guy who did these great movies about repression in the Eisenhower era.
I have to look that up. I didn't know
Yeah.
it was based on an earlier version.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
This guy named Skirk or something, I forget. But anyway, I digress. Why don't you read us one more poem?
I can do that. I'll read you the one that ends the collection.
Okay.
After I kind of drag folks through some tough stuff. This is Christmas. That's my folks calling on the phone. They're saying,
Yeah.
don't read any poems about us. Christmas night, 1957. Grandma's house was packed with family and friends, orbiting a dining room table jammed with cakes, pies, cookies, a clove-studded honey-glazed ham, a bronze turkey slightly smaller than a baby pterodactyl. And at the center, the star of the show, a massive crystal bowl that appeared but once a year, with a half-gallon chunk of vanilla ice cream floating in a lake of Grandma's eggnog. It had always been Grandpa's job to stir in a fifth of Kentucky bourbon. But for the first time, this ritual was performed by one of his sons, Uncle Roy perhaps, or Uncle Albert, I don't remember which. But I remember Grandpa's oxblood leather easy chair, empty this year for the first time, keeping a silent watch on the proceedings. At 5, I had no yardstick to measure the hole the chair created in my mother's childhood home. I was too busy weaving through the forest of grown-up legs for another piece of pie. Finally, with the children overtired and sugar-crazed, our coats and hats were gathered, and the exodus began. All night the spiked nog had been off-limits to my sister and me, but the taste we were allowed just before leaving made us easier to load into the car. On the ride home, while I dozed in the back seat, our station wagon was the world, warm as a womb, the faithful engine's tireless hum, and drifting from the front, a lullaby, the murmur of our parents' voices.
Thank you very much, Charles. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give them the thing. So I'm just going to do some recording now.
Okay.
So, and I have also a voice thing. I might get up tomorrow if I have a chance. It comes out pretty clearly on this thing, and I'll just put it online.
Cool.
And then I'll transcribe this and all this stuff. So
Cool.
I'm good.
Excellent.
I think we missed a bit. I think we missed maybe just like a minute or two of the introduction. because I forgot to press that thing, but other than that, it came out pretty well.
Cool.
All right,
All
my
right,
friend.
sir.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Good to see you. This was fun.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, I always have fun talking about writing.
Right. Okay, so.
Did you make it to the Cambridge River Festival?
I didn't. I was supposed to read for Lowell, but I couldn't. I have to work, so I don't know.
Oh, so you had to take care of
Yeah,
business.
I'll take care of business.